My beloved brothers and sisters, I must speak with a voice that cuts through tradition, with a fire that cannot be silenced, and with a truth that will shake the very foundations of what many have been taught for centuries. Listen carefully, because this message is not meant to soothe, but to awaken. For too long, the people of God have been enslaved by man-made doctrines, shackled by religious institutions, and blinded by practices that have nothing to do with the heart of God. And one of the greatest deceptions that has crept into the house of God is the practice of tithing. Yes, I declare it boldly before you today. Tithing is a sin because it twists the truth, manipulates the faithful, and makes the worship of God into a transaction. Open your ears and let your spirit be alive. Do not turn away from these words. Do not allow fear, tradition, or the pressure of men to drown out the voice of God that is speaking through this truth. You have been told for years that if you do not give 10% of your income, you are robbing God. You have been threatened with curses, with financial ruin, with the loss of blessings. You have been made to believe that your worth before God depends on the amount you place in an envelope. But I ask you, my friends, can the Almighty God, who created the heavens and the earth, who feeds the birds of the air and clothes the lilies of the field, be reduced to a God who demands a percentage? Can the Eternal One, who owns all things, be bribed by your coins? To believe this is to diminish God, to bring Him down to the level of greedy men who twist His name for profit. Do you not see? The moment you treat God as if He were a merchant trading blessings for money, you have fallen into sin. The moment you give out of fear rather than from the purity of your heart, you have entered into bondage. And the moment religious leaders use the pulpit to pressure you into giving while living in wealth and luxury, they commit a great sin against God and against the people. Tithing has become a system of control, not of love. It has become a weapon to rob the poor, rather than a fountain of generosity that flows freely from the heart. The truth, my friends, is this: God never asked for your percentage. God asked for your life. God never said, give me 10% and keep the 90 for yourself. No. God said, Al is mine, you are mine, your life, your breath, your possessions, your soul, all belongs to me. When you live with that understanding, you realize that putting a limit, a calculation, a formula on your giving is an insult to the greatness of God. It is sin because it places human mathematics on divine relationship. It is sin because it cages the freedom of the spirit under the weight of legalistic tradition. Let me speak with plainness. When a man gives because he is threatened, his giving is corrupted. When a woman offers money because she was told God will curse her otherwise, her offering is not holy. It is tainted by fear. And when a congregation applauds itself for fulfilling a law that God did not require, they are not worshiping. They are deceiving themselves. True giving is not a tenth, nor a calculation. True giving is surrender to God with all that you are, with all that you have, in every moment of your life. Anything less, anything forced, anything manipulated is sin. Now, some will resist this message. They will say, but we have always tithed. My response is simple: tradition does not sanctify a lie. Others will say, but my leaders told me God will not bless me unless I tithe. I tell you now, when you rely on men to interpret the heart of God for you, you make them your masters instead of God. Still others will say, but how will the house of God survive without tithers? And I thunder back, the house of God is sustained by God Himself. If a work is truly born of God, then the God who calls will also provide. If a ministry collapses because tithes are not collected, then that ministry was not built on the foundation of God, but on the foundation of human greed. Do not misunderstand me. I am not against giving. I am not against generosity. In fact, I proclaim with all the fire within me that generosity is the very essence of living with God. But generosity must be pure, not polluted by threats. Giving must be from love, not from fear. Offerings must rise from joy, not from guilt. God loves a cheerful giver, not a fearful one. And when you give cheerfully, when you give freely, when you give without calculation, you are no longer bound by sin. You are free in God. My friends, tithing is a sin because it is used as a replacement for true devotion. People believe they can live however they please, commit whatever sins they desire, and then wash their conscience by giving 10%. But God cannot be bought. God cannot be bribed. God is not mocked. You cannot live in darkness and then think your tithe will open the gates of blessing. No. God demands your heart. God demands your obedience. God demands your holiness. And when you give your life fully to God, your giving will not be a percentage. It will be unlimited. You will give your time, your energy, your compassion, your love, your resources, your everything, because you will understand that all of it already belongs to God. Do you see the deception? Religious leaders have turned God's people into spiritual accountants. Instead of teaching surrender, they teach calculation. Instead of calling you to holiness, they call you to percentages. Instead of leading you into the depths of God, they trap you in the shallow waters of financial obligation. And so entire congregations live in bondage, thinking they are pleasing God by handing over a portion, when in reality, their hearts remain untouched. That, my friends, is sin. That is the greatest tragedy. When God sees you, He does not measure your worth by the amount in your pocket. He does not look at your tithe slip or your bank statement. He looks at your heart. He looks at your surrender. He looks at whether you are living for Him in truth. God is not impressed by numbers. God is impressed by obedience. And obedience is not measured in 10%. Obedience is measured in whether you are willing to say, God, all that I am and all that I have is yours. My beloved, listen carefully, for I speak with urgency, as one who carries a burden too heavy to remain silent. There are truths that comfort, and there are truths that cut. What I speak now is the latter. It will cut through the lies. It will pierce through the deception, and it will strike down the falsehood that has enslaved many. When you hear this, do not resist it, for it is the voice of awakening. Tithing has become one of the greatest stumbling blocks in the life of those who claim to walk with God, because it has shifted the focus from devotion to transaction, from surrender to calculation, from worship to business. And anything that shifts the heart away from God is sin. God is not a banker keeping ledgers of your wealth. God is not a merchant standing at the door of heaven, waiting for your payment before he releases his blessings. God is not bound to your coins, your notes, or your percentages. To think so is to reduce the Almighty to the level of men. It is an insult to the infinite, a corruption of the holy, a mockery of the one who gives without limit and sustains without condition. Those who demand your tithe are not speaking with the authority of God. They are speaking with the hunger of their own desires. They build kingdoms of stone and wood, while the souls of the people are starved of truth. They demand 1/10 of your labor, while giving you nothing but fear in return. Let us think with clarity. If tithing were truly the way to please God, then only the wealthy could be righteous. If the measure of your faithfulness were the size of your offering, then the poor would be forever condemned. But has God ever despised the poor? Has God ever rejected the broken because they could not bring silver and gold? No, God looks at the widow who has nothing but a small offering given with sincerity, and he sees more honor in her heart than in the vaults of the rich. This is the proof that God is not moved by the amount, but by the motive. This is the evidence that percentage-based giving is nothing more than human invention, chained to greed, and far removed from the heart of God. Tithing is sin because it teaches you to give by law, not by love. It teaches you to count your coins, but not to count your blessings. It demands you meet a number, but it ignores the state of your soul. What good is it if a man tithes faithfully, but his heart is cold, his lips are filled with lies, his hands are stained with injustice, and his spirit is far from God? Will God look upon his ledger and be pleased? No. God will say, I never asked for your 10th. I asked for your life. And I say to you, beware of those who twist the name of God for gain. Beware of those who turn his house into a marketplace. Beware of those who preach curses upon you unless you pay. These are not shepherds, they are wolves. They do not feed the flock, they feed on the flock. They do not represent the holiness of God. They represent the greed of their own bellies. And the tragedy is that many follow them blindly, fearing the curse of men more than they fear disobedience to God. My friends, if your giving is driven by fear, it is no longer holy. It has become corruption. If your offering is forced, it is no longer an offering. It has become extortion. And if your leaders place burdens on you that God has not commanded, they will answer before the throne of the Almighty. Understand this true. Giving cannot be boxed into percentages. True giving flows from the heart. True giving is not measured by calculation, but by sacrifice. When you surrender fully to God, you will realize that everything you have is already His. Your home, your income, your strength, your talents, your hours, they all belong to God. When you recognize this, you will stop asking, how much should I give? Instead, you will ask, God, how much can I keep back from you when all is yours? That, my beloved, is the freedom of the Spirit. That is the essence of devotion. That is the difference between giving out of law and giving out of love. Do not let anyone enslave you with threats of curses. For God is not waiting to destroy you because you missed 1/10 of your salary. God is not petty, counting your mistakes with a calculator in his hand. No, God is merciful, God is generous, God is boundless. The one who curses you for not tithing is not speaking for God, but against him. For God blesses freely, not conditionally. He opens the heavens, not because you paid a price, but because he is faithful to those who trust him. And hear me, if you give a tenth, thinking you have satisfied God, but you ignore the needs of your neighbor, you are in sin. If you place money in the hands of religious leaders, but turn away from the hungry, the thirsty, the orphan, and the oppressed, your tithe becomes an offense. God does not need your money. He desires your compassion. God does not require your tenth. He requires your justice. God does not hunger for your coins. He hungers for your heart. Do you know why tithing has been exalted so highly in many places? Because it is easier to manipulate money than to demand holiness. It is easier to command percentages than to preach repentance. It is easier to build buildings than to build souls. And so men have chosen the path of convenience, enslaving the people to law while ignoring the call to purity. But I declare to you today, God is not mocked. God will tear down every system that elevates money above truth. God will strip the masks from those who exploit his name. And God will raise up a people who will serve him with undivided hearts, unshackled from tradition, free to love, free to give, free to live wholly for him. So, my beloved, break free from the chains of this deception. Do not let your relationship with God be reduced to mathematics. Do not measure your faith by the size of your envelope. Do not think your standing before God can be bought or sold. Give to God with freedom, give with joy, give with compassion, give with the knowledge that everything belongs to him already. And when you live like this, you will see a life overflowing with peace, because you will no longer live under the burden of obligation, but under the freedom of devotion. My beloved, lean in and listen closely, for the truth I speak is not a whisper, but a thunder that shakes the very ground of falsehood. There are times when a preacher must comfort, but there are also times when a preacher must confront. Today is a day of confrontation with a lie that has walked too long among the people of God. This lie has wrapped itself in garments of holiness. It has stood in pulpits. It has raised its voice with authority, but beneath it all, it is deception. And I say it without fear. Tithing, as it is preached and practiced today, is a sin because it corrupts the purity of devotion and entangles the heart of worship with the chains of money. God is not a collector of fees. God is not sitting in the heavens calculating percentages as though he were an accountant of men. To imagine so is to shrink his majesty to the level of our systems. God is far above such limitations. He is the owner of all things, the giver of every breath, the sustainer of every heartbeat. What can you possibly offer him that is not already his? What coin, what bill, what portion of your labor can you claim as yours to begin with? Everything in your hand is on loan from God. When you understand this, you will see how shallow and distorted the practice of tithing has become. The tragedy is that men have used tithing not as a call to holiness, but as a tool of manipulation. They have built empires of stone and marble while the poor weep in silence. They have preached curses on the faithful if they fail to pay, while they themselves live in comfort, luxury, and ease. They stand before the people with smiles on their faces, but behind their smiles is the hunger for more wealth, more buildings, more power. And all of this is done in the name of God. But I tell you, God is not mocked. God sees. God hears. God will not remain silent forever. Those who misuse his name for profit will one day tremble under his judgment. Now, do not mistake my words. I do not say that giving is wrong. Giving is holy when it springs from the fountain of love, when it is born out of gratitude, when it flows from a heart that knows everything belongs to God. But when giving is chained to fear, when it is driven by guilt, when it is demanded as a condition for blessings, it ceases to be holy and becomes polluted. God does not delight in coerced offerings. God delights in free will. God delights in the soul that says, I will give not because I must, but because I love. I will give not because I am threatened, but because I am grateful. I will give not because I calculate, but because I surrender. And let us ask ourselves this: if a man gives 10% of his wealth faithfully, but withholds mercy from his neighbor, is he righteous? If a woman tithes every month, but harbors bitterness, envy, and deceit in her heart, does God receive her offering? No. For God does not measure devotion in numbers. He measures devotion in purity. God does not look at the portion of your money. He looks at the condition of your soul. The greatest offering you can give is not a tenth of your labor. It is the entirety of your life. The sin of tithing lies not only in its practice, but in its effect. It has created generations of believers who measure their relationship with God by their wallets instead of their hearts. It has silenced the call to holiness with the noise of financial obligation. It has turned the house of God into a marketplace where blessings are bought and sold. My friends, when you see religion reduced to transactions, know that you are no longer standing in the truth of God, but in the system of men. And here is another truth. God does not need your money to accomplish his purposes. If God desires a work to be done, he will provide the resources, whether through the hearts of willing servants or by his own unseen hand. If a ministry survives only because people are coerced into tithing, that ministry is not sustained by God, but by manipulation. And if it falls, when the tithers are removed, then it was never founded on the rock of God's provision. True works of God are upheld by his power, not by the forced contributions of his people. Let us also consider the poor, the widow, the orphan, the laborer struggling to put food on the table. Do you think God is pleased when they are pressured to give the little? They have to maintain the wealth of institutions. Do you think God will curse a hungry child because his parents could not produce a tenth of their wage? God is not cruel. God is not unjust. God is not a tyrant demanding payment from the weak. God is merciful, and his mercy is greater than the traditions of men. Hear me now. The holiest form of giving is not measured in percentages, but in sacrifice. If a man with abundance gives 10% and keeps 90% for his pleasure, while another with little gives freely out of his need, who is more righteous before God? It is the one who gives with sincerity, not calculation. It is the one whose gift cost him something, not the one who gave out of excess. God sees not the amount, but the weight of the sacrifice. And often, the smallest gift in the eyes of men is the greatest treasure in the eyes of God. Therefore, do not be deceived. Do not measure your faithfulness by the ledger of percentages. Measure it by the depth of your surrender. Measure it by the purity of your heart. Measure it by the love you show to those in need, the justice you uphold in your dealings, the humility with which you walk before God. That is the true God requires, not your money, but your life. My beloved, open your heart, for I speak not with the authority of men, but with the weight of truth that flows from the reality of God. Too long have chains of tradition been mistaken for the voice of God. Too long have the faithful been trapped in systems that God never commanded. And the strongest of these chains is tithing, a practice that has been exalted above obedience, elevated above mercy, and substituted for true devotion. But I tell you now with unshakable conviction, this is not the way of God. God does not desire your calculation. God desires your consecration. God does not seek your percentage. God seeks your purity. Look around you at the world. Do you not see how the love of money has corrupted the hearts of many? Do you not see how it has crept even into the house of God, clothed in religious garments, carrying the name of holiness, yet driven by greed? When money becomes the center, God is pushed aside. When men preach more about giving than about righteousness, the altar has been defiled. Tithing, as it is taught today, feeds this corruption because it conditions the mind to think that blessings are bought, that curses are avoided by payments, that God can be managed like a creditor. This is an offense to the holiness of God. God cannot be bought. God cannot be bribed. God is not swayed by numbers written on envelopes. God looks deeper. He looks at your thoughts, your intentions, your actions, your very soul. If your money is laid on the altar, but your heart is absent, God rejects it. If you give 10%, but your life is filled with deceit, God despises it. If you pay faithfully yet ignore the cry of the oppressed, your offering rises as smoke, but not as worship. It rises as judgment. For what pleases God is not your tithe, but your truth, not your silver, but your sincerity. Hear this. When you treat God like a business partner, you dishonor Him. When you give to Him expecting a guaranteed return, you insult His greatness. When you hand over a percentage and believe that settles your obligation, you diminish His authority. God is not a merchant. God is the Creator, the Master, the Lord of all existence. He asks not for your fraction, but for your fullness. He asks not for your tenth, but for your total. Anything less is not worship. It is compromise. And let me speak with even greater boldness. Those who enforce tithing upon you commit sin themselves. They claim to speak for God, but they speak their own hunger. They build towers of wealth while the people suffer. They declare curses upon those who cannot pay, while they themselves exploit the name of the Almighty. They are like those of old who turned the house of prayer into a house of trade. And I tell you with certainty, God sees, and God will not be silent. Their wealth will testify against them, and their manipulation will be judged. For God is a defender of the poor, and He will not allow their cries to go unanswered. Beloved, let your eyes be open to the greater truth. God's desire is not to take from you, but to make you free. Free from fear, free from manipulation, free from the lies of men. When you give to God, let it be, because your heart overflows with gratitude. Let it be, because you cannot contain the joy of His goodness. Let it be, because you long to reflect His generosity. That kind of giving cannot be measured by percentage. Sometimes it will be more than 10%, sometimes less. But always it will be led by the Spirit of God within you, not by the law of men. Do not think I am teaching stinginess. No, I call you to something higher. I call you to radical generosity, not the generosity of law, but of love. When you see the hungry, feed them. When you see the naked, clothe them. When you see the oppressed, lift them. This is the offering God receives with joy. This is the sacrifice that ascends to Him like sweet fragrance. When your hand opens to your neighbor in need, you are giving directly to God. When your heart pours out compassion, you are laying treasure in eternity, and that treasure is worth more than all the tithes of all the temples of men. Think of this, beloved. If your child came to you and gave you 10% of his allowance, but treated you with dishonor, would you be pleased? Would you not rather have his respect, his love, his obedience? So it is with God. He does not want your calculated gifts while your soul remains distant. He desires your devotion. He desires that you walk humbly, act justly, and love Him with all your heart. Tithing distracts from this because it makes you think that fulfilling a duty fulfills your relationship. But relationship with God is not duty. It is surrender. It is intimacy. It is complete alignment of your life with His will. And here is a mystery if you consider. When you tithe, you limit God's claim. You say, this part belongs to you, but the rest is mine. But when you surrender fully, you recognize all belongs to God, and I am only a steward. The sin of tithing is that it deceives you into believing partial ownership, when in reality, there is no such thing. God owns all. You are but a trustee of His wealth. And if you are faithful with little, He will entrust you with more. Not because you gave a tenth, but because you lived as one who knows nothing is yours to begin with. Therefore, beloved, tear down this idol of percentages. Refuse to be enslaved by fear. Refuse to let men place curses upon you that God never declared. Refuse to live as an accountant in the presence of the Almighty. Live instead as a child before your Father, free, surrendered, overflowing with gratitude. When you live like this, your giving will have power, not because of its amount, but because of its purity. It will move the heart of God, not because it is calculated, but because it is consecrated. My beloved, hear me as I bring this truth to its close. The voice of God is not a voice of oppression, nor a voice of fear. It is a voice of freedom, a voice of purity, a voice that calls His people out of bondage and into the light of truth. Tithing, as it has been preached by men, is not the pathway to God. It is a chain forged by greed, a shadow that has covered the true meaning of devotion. God never asked you for a percentage. God never demanded a calculation. God asked for your heart, your life, your surrender, your obedience. Do not leave this message thinking it is about withholding, for it is not about withholding at all. It is about releasing. Releasing yourself from fear. Releasing yourself from manipulation. Releasing yourself from the lie that you can purchase the blessings of the Almighty. When you give, let it be pure, let it be cheerful, let it be led by love. When you open your hand, let it be because your heart is overflowing with gratitude, not because your mind is terrified by curses. When you serve, let it be with joy, not with compulsion. This is the kind of offering that touches the heart of God. So rise, children of God. Rise above tradition. Rise above manipulation. Rise above the empty threats of men. Walk in freedom. Live in surrender. Let your life itself become the offering. Let your every breath be a gift to the one who gave it. Let your compassion, your justice, your humility, your love be the true tithe that God desires. And when you live like this, you will discover that the windows of heaven do not open because you paid. They open because you trusted. They open because you walked with God in truth. They open because you gave Him not a tenth, but all. This is the call, this is the truth, and this is the freedom. All belongs to God. All is sustained by God. All returns to God. Give Him not your portion, but your everything. And you will find that in losing nothing for Him, you gain everything from Him.